Think about stepping on a Lego brick or snapping two of them together. The plastic is rigid, permanent, and notoriously indestructible. Yet the foundation of this plastic empire is built on a relentless cycle of total devastation. In 1916, a humble, uneducated carpenter named Ole Kirk Christiansen bought a small workshop in rural Denmark. He made his living carving heavy timber to build solid, permanent houses and furniture for local dairy farmers. Ole spent his early years constructing things designed to last for generations. So when the physical things he built began to disappear, the loss hit hard. The first tragedy struck in 1924. While playing in his workshop, his young sons accidentally set a pile of wood shavings on fire. Within minutes, the blaze consumed the entire building, taking the family home down with it. Ole took out heavy loans and immediately built a larger, more ambitious workshop to replace what he'd lost. But that expansion was timed poorly. When the global economic collapse reached Denmark in 1929, local farmers simply stopped buying houses and furniture. Ole's business dried up almost overnight. Then came the cruelest blow. In 1932, his wife Christine passed away. Ole found himself completely bankrupt, a grieving single father trying to raise 4 boys under the age of 15. He had no money, no market for his trade, and a family to feed. To understand how the modern concept of play was born, you have to look at exactly what a desperate carpenter does with a pile of discarded wood scraps. To keep his children smiling, Ole gathered the leftover scraps around his empty workshop and started carving miniature pull-along ducks, cars, and piggy banks. Since his neighbors couldn't pay with cash, Ole packed these high-quality wooden toys into his car and traded them to local farmers for whatever they could spare, mostly basic survival staples like flour and potatoes. This survival tactic kept his boys fed, and by 1934, he turned it into a company. He combined the Danish words leg godt, meaning play well, to form the name Lego. The company grew steadily until 1942, when disaster struck a second time. Amidst the tension of a hostile military occupation during World War II, an electrical fire sparked in the factory and leveled his business to the ground. Despite severe wartime material shortages, Ole refused to quit. He cleared the debris and built the factory again from scratch. But watching his life's work turn to ash twice revealed a glaring flaw in his process. Wood was entirely too vulnerable to fire. If he wanted to build a legacy that actually survived, he needed a different material altogether. In 1947, at 56 years old, Ole saw a demonstration of a British plastic molding machine. He took every bit of savings he had left and purchased the first plastic injection molding machine in Denmark. Other toy manufacturers dismissed plastic as a cheap, temporary fad that would blow over. Ole saw a material that wouldn't rot and wouldn't burn. This diagram shows the cross-section of his early automatic binding bricks, and you can clearly see the initial problem. They were completely hollow underneath. Without any internal friction, they just stacked loosely on top of each other and fell apart easily. Ole's son, Godfred, took on the task of fixing his father's flawed design. The family operated under a strict motto, only the best is good enough, and these bricks were failing. Godfred's solution was a breakthrough: clutch power. He added hollow support tubes down the center. When pressed together, these tubes created rigid friction points against the bottom brick. A minor geometric adjustment turned a frustrating novelty toy into an infinitely stable, reusable building system. On January 28, 1958, Lego officially patented this exact interlocking brick design. That Ole wouldn't live to see the results. He suffered a fatal heart attack just 2 months later, leaving the perfected company solely in Godfred's hands. He died right before the boom. The man who spent his life battling bankruptcy and watching his workshops burn left behind a multi-billion-dollar empire that spans the globe today. The core mechanic of a Lego brick is to stack pieces together, tear them down, and use those same pieces to construct something entirely new. Every time a child snaps apart a creation to build something stronger, they are physically acting out the exact cycle of loss and resilience that kept a grieving Danish carpenter moving forward. For decades, a bucket of Legos was a fixture in almost every family home. Throughout the 1970s, 80s, and early 90s, the Danish toy maker was an unstoppable powerhouse, loved by families across the globe. That global dominance followed a massive gamble in 1960. After a third warehouse fire burned down their wooden stock, Gottfried made a drastic choice. Lego stopped wooden toy production, focusing 100% on plastic bricks. He introduced the system of play. The rule was absolute. Every single plastic brick manufactured must perfectly connect with any other brick. By locking every piece to this universal standard, Lego created an infinitely scalable business model without reinventing manufacturing pipelines. The success of this system was immediate. When they opened the first Legoland theme park in Billund in 1968, it drew 600,000 visitors in its very first year. In 1978, they introduced the iconic minifigure. These small, yellow-faced characters allowed children to create endless role-playing worlds, and crucially, they integrated into the exact same underlying brick system. Global dominance was built on the back of logistical simplicity. By keeping the core components universal, Lego turned a child's toy into a scalable industrial system. But by the late 1990s, the cultural landscape shifted at breakneck speed. Children's attention began drifting away from physical blocks as the world digitized. The first major blow came from the explosion of handheld digital devices, offering interactive experiences that traditional toys couldn't match. Next came the rising dominance of home gaming consoles. Nintendo and the Sony PlayStation presented immersive digital worlds that physical bricks struggled to duplicate. Inside Lego headquarters, executives watched these trends and experienced a profound existential panic. Lee looked at the new internet and video game era and became convinced that their core product was officially obsolete. That blind panic caused leadership to distrust the very foundation of the company. It created a dangerous vacuum at the top, where steady logic was replaced by frantic reactivity. Their immediate response was to abandon their strengths and blindly throw money at random new industries. Management greenlit a dizzying array of expensive new ventures. Suddenly, Lego was producing its own line of apparel, video games, TV shows, and even children's jewelry. At the same time, they authorized massive capital expenditures to rapidly build large new Legoland theme parks across international markets. They expanded their physical footprint aggressively, opening enormous, costly facilities in Germany and the United States. Instead of driving new corporate revenue, these sprawling attractions bled hundreds of millions of dollars in maintenance costs. Lego had mutated into a bloated, unfocused entertainment conglomerate that was hemorrhaging cash. Their most fatal internal error happened in the core toy division. Lego actively broke their own system of play to chase whatever specialized toy trend was popular that month. They moved away from classic building blocks to design highly specialized action figures like the Galador line. These toys lacked the ability to be rebuilt into other creations. This chart maps the consequence. For years, Lego maintained a baseline of 6,000 unique parts. Then, that number aggressively spiked to over 12,000. Doubling the part count overnight created a warehousing nightmare. Because each specialized part required a new single-use mold, production costs skyrocketed. They were paying a premium to produce these hyper-specific toys, right as consumer demand for them was plummeting. Lego had engineered its own logistical collapse. They took an elegant manufacturing system and shattered it into 12,000 expensive, disconnected problems. The immediate financial consequence hit in 1998, when Lego recorded the first financial loss in its 70-year history. By 2003, the scale of the disaster was undeniable. The company was drowning in over $800 million of debt. The velocity of their collapse was terrifying. They were actively losing hundreds of thousands of dollars every single day. External partners quickly turned their backs. Major retailers, tired of holding dead stock, refused to put this massive unsold inventory on their shelves. The final death knell came when banks threatened to pull their credit lines entirely. Financial analysts declared the Danish titan officially dead and bound for liquidation. The brink of liquidation was a direct result of internal panic. By abandoning their elegant foundational logic in a desperate attempt to compete with digital media, Lego had effectively engineered its own demise. Every single year, toy factories all around the world churn out over 100 billion interlocking plastic bricks. This chart tracks modern toy industry dominance. By 2024, LEGO was generating over $9 billion in annual revenue, easily surpassing legacy giants like Mattel and Hasbro. But if you look back exactly 20 years, the picture completely flips. In 2004, the Christiansen family's sprawling toy empire was hemorrhaging cash and sitting just weeks away from total bankruptcy. To understand the greatest corporate comeback in toy history, we have to look at how a company built on infinite creativity almost designed its demise. By the early 2000s, LEGO had lost its focus. Management was pouring capital into excessive side projects, stretching their resources across branded clothing lines and disjointed digital experiments. They were also trying to operate sprawling physical theme parks around the world, taking on the massive infrastructure and overhead required to keep them running. Inside the factories, the bloat was even worse. Designers had introduced over 12,000 unique, highly specific, and often incompatible brick components, creating logistical bottlenecks and massive manufacturing waste. The company had abandoned the single basic constraint that made their toy work in the first place: the simple interlocking brick. With the founding family stepping down from management, the board brought in a 35-year-old former McKinsey consultant named Jürgen Vake Knutstorp. He was the first non-family member to ever lead LEGO. Knutstorp immediately implemented a rescue plan built on aggressive reduction. He called it "back to the brick." His first target was the massive capital drain. He sold a 70% controlling stake in the money-losing theme parks to Merlin Entertainments, injecting the company with desperately needed cash. Next, he audited the factory floor, slashing the number of individual brick components from 12,000 down to roughly 6,000. This halving of inventory eliminated the massive factory waste and finally stabilized their global supply chain. By aggressively shrinking operations and cutting out bloated distractions, Knutstorp pulled the company back from the edge of ruin. Once the foundation was stable, LEGO looked outward. They discovered a massive, largely ignored demographic of adults who were still eager to build complex sets. They began designing specifically for adult fans of LEGO, or AFOLs, releasing premium architectural models and large-scale intricate display pieces. At the same time, the company mastered external IP licensing, integrating global franchises like Star Wars, Harry Potter, and Marvel into their product lines. They also developed highly profitable original story franchises in-house, generating billions through toy lines and animated series like Bionicle and Ninjago. By combining challenging builds with recognizable characters, LEGO proved their plastic bricks were premium vessels for complex storytelling. This storytelling strategy reached its peak in 2014 when Warner Bros. And LEGO released The LEGO Movie. Produced on a budget of $60 million, the film grossed over $470 million worldwide. The production turned the mechanical logic of modular building into a global cinematic event, celebrating the creative potential inherent in the system. The financial stability generated by Knutstorp's early and austerity measures provided the capital necessary for this kind of high-stakes creative expansion. 6 years later, the COVID-19 pandemic triggered strict lockdowns worldwide, shifting how people spent their time and money. Stranded at home, families sought out tangible, hands-on activities that didn't require another screen. Because LEGO had spent the previous 16 years refining its core building system, the company was perfectly positioned to meet this demand, sending revenues exploding to all-time highs. The enduring result of the 2004 turnaround was a disciplined infrastructure, one resilient enough to thrive in the middle of a global crisis. It's a long way from the company's origins, which started with a grieving carpenter carving small wooden toys out of scraps from his burned-down workshop. Today, those few hand-carved ducks and trains have evolved into an empire that manufactures over 100 billion precise plastic elements annually. The way Knutstorp saved LEGO mirrors the mechanical nature of the toy itself, by removing the clutter and returning to the foundational piece. From a burned-out workshop to the edge of bankruptcy, LEGO has survived by discarding what wasn't working and building again from the pieces that remained.